Thanks for staying with us here at No Apologies. I have a very nice treat for you tonight. With us, joining us remotely from Wyoming is the representative at large for Wyoming, Harriet Hageman. Harriet, thanks so much for joining us on No Apologies, and congratulations on winning the seat against Liz Cheney.
Well, it's wonderful to be here, and thank you for those kind words.
This is such a big deal for Wyoming, being able to have a congresswoman now who actually represents the people. And I was thrilled to see that you won by such a great margin. I'd like to play a little clip for you right off the bat here from your victory speech. And it was indicative of kind of the whole ethos of your whole campaign. Let's roll it.
And what Wyoming has shown today is that while it may not be easy, we can dislodge entrenched politicians who believe they've risen above the people they are supposed to represent and serve. Yes, Wyoming has spoken, and we have made it clear that we are taking our country back.
Harriet, your speeches, you did one other speech when you were campaigning too that was so memorable. Like, we are tired of this. We are tired of this.
We're fed up.
We're fed up. It was so great. It was so great. And you honestly, so you know, for those of us in other, maybe flyover states, but other states across the country, you are an inspiration to many of us that we can be heard if we just work really hard at it.
Well, I believe that. It's the very foundation of our form of government. We are a republic. We are a representative form of government. And the purpose of people like me and other politicians, whether they're your representatives or your senators or the president of the United States or your county commissioners, our job is to represent the interests of the citizens that we serve. As you noted at the top of this discussion, I am an at-large member, meaning I represent the entire state of Wyoming, and North Dakota is similar to our situation. You have one member of the House of Representatives. We can take our country back. We can dislodge entrenched politicians. We can show that this is a government of, by, and for the people. And one of the ways in which we do that is we mobilize the grassroots. We recruit good candidates. We get out there and talk about the issues that are important to our citizens. And we go back to Washington, D.C., and we fight the unelected bureaucrats. We fight the horrible policies coming out of the Biden administration. We disclose and we bring sunlight to the corruption that we're seeing in so many of our agencies. We can do it. We have to fight to do it. We have to be willing to do it. But I think that my race demonstrates very clearly that if you can dislodge a Cheney, you can dislodge anybody in this country.
It was so thrilling. It was very, very fun. I was cheering along with all Wyoming residents that night as well. And I want you to know that I think that the people with whom you have aligned in your first weeks in Congress are a pretty good group of folks.
Well, I think that's true. But what I'm going to say is I'm pretty impressed with the Republican conference as a whole. I think that what took place with the election of Speaker McCarthy allowed us to bond in a way that we wouldn't have otherwise done. What a lot of people don't understand is we don't go back there and sit on the floor of the House for 8 hours a day. We go in and spend a very little amount of time voting. We're in meetings, we're in hearings, we're meeting with constituents, we're doing all different kinds of things. But because we were together for 4 days voting on the speaker, we actually spent about 25 hours together. And I got to have some great conversations with people from all over the United States. And we were able to really strategize and talk about what our agenda is going to be and how we're going to get this ship back on track of where it needs to be, what we're going to need to do in terms of spending reform, what we're going to need to do in terms of regulatory reform, the fact that we need to be taking power out of Washington, D.C. and bringing it back to the states where it belongs. So I've actually been able to build up a rapport and a relationship with a lot of people at our conference, and I feel that it's going to help us to move forward with making the changes that need to be made.
I hadn't even thought about that, but you take a vote, for speaker, but then you have all that time in between times to actually do some discussions. I hadn't even thought, but what a silver lining and what a great outcome when there is what the press was calling dissension and, oh, this is so damaging to them. Just the opposite was happening.
No, this is the way our government is supposed to work. We're entitled to engage. We're entitled and we're responsible for ensuring that we are the voice of the American people that we serve. And we do that by having these kinds of discussions. The press just wants to show everything that the Republicans and conservatives do as being dysfunctional. But keep in mind, every single one of those votes took approximately 90 minutes. And so, yes, you would stand up and vote, and that would be maybe a 2-second period of time. But the rest of the time, you're interacting with the other people. I actually think that it was a very positive experience. I thought that the debate was something that needed to be had. And most importantly, we got some extremely important changes to the rules. Now, I had visited with Kevin McCarthy before we ever went in on January 3rd, and he had committed to a lot of the rule changes that were important to me, including the ability to make amendments from the floor. We've had several different voting on various things where there have been amendments from the floor. The Congress, and I didn't even know this, but the House of Representatives has not allowed amendments from the floor since John Boehner was Speaker. It's been 10 years since people could present amendments from the floor. But again, I keep coming back to this and saying the same thing, which is that is the way that our government is supposed to work. The last 3 speakers, however, have made it so that that isn't the way that it works. We got that back. We're back to regular order. We're now going to have 72 hours before we have to vote on any bill. We're making it very clear to the Senate we're not going to tolerate any more omnibus spending bills. All of the bills have to be single subject, and any amendments have to be germane so that we're not putting together 4,000-page monstrosities that cost our government another $1.7 trillion. So there were some extremely important changes that have been made to the rules that I think is going to make us a much more important functioning body to represent our citizens.
It's so good to hear all of this. You have some committee assignments, and your areas of expertise are very unique.
Yes, I am on the Judiciary Committee. I'm a water, natural resource, and constitutional attorney and have been for 34 years. So I am on the Judiciary Committee. I'm on the Natural Resource Committee. I have been appointed as the chairman of the Subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs. So I will be overseeing all 574 tribes, as well as our 5 territories. And then I am also on the Select Committee for the weaponization of the federal government. And I am also the freshman representative on the Policy Committee for Congress. And so hopefully I will be able to engage in setting policy for moving forward. What kinds of bills, what is the agenda that we're moving forward for the American public.
Thanks for sticking with us here on No Apologies. We are talking to Harriet Hageman, who is the at-large Congresswoman from the great state of Wyoming. Thank you for joining us remotely, Harriet. This is a really fun conversation for me to talk to you because we learn so much more when we talk to people directly rather than when we're just getting the regular not alternative news versions or the mainstream media's versions of what's going on with the speaker debate, etc. This is an interesting thing. Your assignments in Congress are really tailored to your areas of expertise, things like environmental issues and the EPA and dealing with that. And I am really looking forward to seeing what you can do in the next 2 years.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's why I was extremely honored to get the 2 first choices that I had in committees. Actually, 3 choices. I wanted to be on the Select Committee for the weaponization of the federal government. I truly believe that sunshine is the best disinfectant. We need to disclose, we need to uncover, and we need to expose what's been going on in some of our agencies as they have been weaponized against us. The FBI, the DOJ, the NIH, Anthony Fauci, the CDC, these various 3-letter agencies have really become very despotic and tyrannical in how they have been conducting business. And we need to expose them, and we need to be drafting legislation to make sure that we can actually carry out what our government is supposed to be in terms of our constitutional rights, our civil liberties, our freedoms, those sorts of things. So I'm excited to be on that committee. And then in the Natural Resources Committee, I'm on the Water Subcommittee, and as I just indicated, I'm the chairman of the Subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs. As far as the Judiciary Committee, I'm on Constitutional and Civil Rights Subcommittee, and I'm also on the Administrative Law Subcommittee. And in that, what I want to do is, again, we have stockpiled way, way, way too much power in these agencies and with unelected bureaucrats that are not accountable to any of us. We need to change how we are governing in Washington, D.C. But one of the most important things is we need to be bringing power out of Washington, D.C. and returning it to the states where it belongs. One of the things that so many people have said, and it's absolutely true, is that Washington, D.C. does not have a revenue problem. Washington, D.C. has a spending problem. I'm going to say it a little bit differently. We are laundering way too much money through Washington, D.C. If you have a program, and it may even be a good program, let's say it's going to cost $200,000. If you run that out of Washington, D.C., it's going to cost you $400,000 because Washington, D.C. has to take its cut. When I say we launder money through Washington, D.C., I mean that very sincerely. We have agencies that their sole purpose, in large part anymore, is simply to stockpile more and more and more power with them and in their agencies to perpetuate their own existence. We've almost created a situation where it's a conflict of interest. The EPA is never going to declare that we have clean air or clean water or that we properly maintain and protect our natural resources, because the moment they do, then why do they need tens of thousands of people across this country attempting to persecute people? So then you have a real natural disaster like the train derailment in Ohio. And where is everybody? Where is the EPA? Where is the Department of Transportation? At the moment when those agencies should actually bring their expertise to bear to address something, they escape, they run away because they don't want to be held responsible or accountable for anything that happened. And I don't think there's any better example of that than what has happened in Ohio. We know that's an environmental disaster. We know, the things that we see, the forest fires, the uncontrolled forest fires that we're seeing, many of which are man-made. And by that, I don't mean that they're man-set, but it's our failure of the Forest Service to actually properly manage those resources has resulted in catastrophic forest fires across the country. Where is the EPA when talking about those kinds of things? Where is the Forest Service in terms of wanting to preserve those resources in our wildlife and things like that? So again, what you have is agencies that are not carrying out the duties that were assigned to them, but stockpiling more and more power among themselves and their friends, just as a way of basically running things and being dictators and despots.
That's so true. That is so very, very, very true. We just had Senator Kramer on this evening on the program, and he just touched on it a little bit, but speak to eminent domain and its use, because that puts up red flags for a lot of people and landowners.
Well, of course it does. And I know that you are aware, but I've been a private property rights attorney for a long, long time. And so I have pushed back against the federal government as the EPA has come in and attempted to take control, for example, of irrigation infrastructure under the auspices of the Clean Water Act. It's my lawsuit. I actually sued the federal government over the EPA over the blowout of the Gold King mine in southwestern Colorado several years ago. They went in, they destroyed the mine, turned the Animas River orange within a very short time, said, oh, it's okay, everything's fine. There's no environmental repercussion as a result of what we've done. If that had been a private citizen that did what the EPA had done, that person would have got to prison probably for the rest of their life. But nobody has been held accountable. They took my client's property. They never paid him compensation in over 7.5 years of squatting on his property. And they're using it essentially by eminent domain, but never having paid for it. So there is a purpose and a place for eminent domain, but we need to look very closely at the manner in which it's exercised. And we also have to look at what the real intent of the government is when it exercises it, or even private companies. Obviously, we're going to need transmission lines. We're going to have to consider things like that. But we also have to make sure that people are fairly compensated. And we also have to make sure that we are having the least impact possible and following the Constitution.
Now, you have begun your congressional career doing a lot of town halls. Again, Kevin Kramer, who was in Congress, was really good about that, very well known as being the most accessible with town halls. And you have begun doing those as well. How are those going?
Well, they're going extremely well. I've been home 2 different times since we started in January. And I've spent most of my time traveling around the state of Wyoming. So I've done town halls in Jackson, Lander, Casper. I had a really wonderful meeting last week in Cheyenne. It wasn't exactly a town hall, but I had an opportunity to visit with some great folks and leaders right here in Cheyenne. I've also done Laramie and Pinedale. So I've done a total of 6 town halls. I will continue to do them whenever I'm home. I'm actually going to be leaving tomorrow since I'm on the Judiciary Committee. We're heading down to Yuma to have a hearing on Thursday about the border. So I'm leaving tomorrow for that, and then we go back into session on Monday. But I've committed to doing a town hall in every county every year. Several counties I've already visited a couple of times now, just since January. But I will continue doing that because I truly believe you can't represent people unless you know what their issues are. And the only way to know what their issues are is if you talk to them.
Right, face to face. That is the wonderful thing about Wyoming and North Dakota, is that we've got a little lower population, that you can be very accessible. You can be, available to your constituents. It's a wonderful thing.
Yes, it is.
Now,
and I like getting out and talking to people.
Right.
I mean, this isn't a one-way road. This is an opportunity for dialogue and discussion. We've got a lot of things we need to fix in this country. The only way we're going to do it is with the hardworking people from North Dakota and Wyoming and Montana and South Dakota and Nebraska engaging with the government to find the solutions that we need.
Amen. Not only that, but there is something to be said for cowboy logic and common sense, and you'll find it in these states as well. Harriet, thank you once again for being with us. I very much appreciate talking to you. We will have you on again and find out what things are like and going for you, and how they are going for you in the Congress. Thank you so much for being on the program.